This is EC 201, lecture 41. In the last class we looked at the frequency response of the common source amplifier and the common drain amplifier. One small thing I wish to point out with respect to the common drain amplifier is the following. This was the small signal equivalent we were working with yesterday. There was some load resistance RL and some capacitance CSB. If I call this ZL, this was V in, this was V out, and this is GM times V in minus V out. A small observation is that concerning the impedance looking into the amplifier, Zin. I have called the total impedance at the source as ZL. You know, depending on what that impedance is, it could be a pure resistor in parallel with the capacitor, whatever. Okay, you can make the appropriate substitutions in ZL and find the input impedance. Can somebody quickly tell me what the input impedance looking into the amplifier Zin will be? How will I find the input impedance? Would I want to put in a voltage, measure the current, or put in a current, measure the voltage? Things are in series, so it makes sense to put in a current. Let me apply a test current source, Ix, and I'd like to find whatever Vx is developed across the input port. Vx is simply nothing but Ix by SCGS. That's the voltage drop across the capacitor, plus whatever voltage is there across ZL. And what is the voltage across ZL? It's nothing but ZL times the current flowing through it. And what is the current flowing through it? It's nothing but Ix plus GM times Vx minus V out. I mean, is there an alternative expression you can find for V in minus V out? V in minus V out is nothing but the voltage drop across CGS, which is Ix divided by SCGS. Does it make sense? Vx by Ix is nothing but 1 over SCGS plus ZL plus GM times ZL divided by SCGS. So you can at a pinch understand why these two come in, and that is simply because this Ix flows through CGS as well as ZL. So it is quite natural to see both of these guys appearing in series as the input impedance. Let's take a closer look at the last term, which is GM ZL by SCGS. The observation is, if ZL is purely resistive, then what will it look like? ZL is equal to RL, some resistor. Okay, so what does it look like? GM ZL by SCGS simply looks like 1 over SCGS divided by GM RL. ZL is equal to RL. Doesn't seem particularly interesting. What happens if ZL is equal to an inductor? So if ZL is equal to SL, then GM times ZL divided by SCGS is equal to GM by CGS times L. This is a little surprising in the beginning. Why? For incremental signals, if I put an inductor in the source, an inductor of value L, please note that the transistor itself has only, the circuit consists of completely lossless passive elements, right? The incremental equivalent circuit for the transistor, as we just saw, is this is Gm times V in, V out. The network itself consists only of lossless passive elements and of course a controlled source. At first it seems very strange that even though the network only consists of L, C and some controlled sources, the looking in impedance here has got a resistive component. So why is this happening? If you have a box only with resistors and capacitors, which are all lossless, if you find the looking in impedance of such a box, it will also be, it will be purely reactive, because there is no energy that can be dissipated inside the box. So the looking in impedance Zin must be purely reactive. Alright. So by the same token, we might assume at first sight that this box, consists of basically lossless elements and a controlled source. But the looking in impedance, even though there is CGS and there is L, has a resistive component to it. So the obvious culprit must be the controlled source. The bottom line is that controlled sources enable you to realize all sorts of weird impedances from something else. A given impedance Z can be transformed into something which looks totally different. Okay, if you put a box with controlled sources, this can look quite different from what the original Z is. One example that you saw is the following, which is, if this had a gain A and if I put a capacitance Cx between the input and output of the box, the looking in impedance looks like a capacitance of value A plus 1 times Cx. A small capacitance is made to look like a large capacitance by means of a controlled source. So maybe about a week from now we will be able to see how you can do something which seems on the face of it quite remarkable, which is we will figure out a way of using controlled sources to take a capacitor and make it look like an inductor. This also has got a lot of very practical implications, because please note that making large inductors is extremely difficult. They will be bulky and are completely impractical from a miniature circuit viewpoint. So a lot of work has gone on trying to figure out how to, what are the most efficient ways of converting a capacitance to an inductance. And once you have inductors and capacitors, you can realize pole pairs which are not just confined to the negative real axis, but also complex conjugate pole pairs. And if you have a network with only R's and C's, or only resistors and inductors, without the other element, without the capacitor in the second case or the inductor in the first case, the poles of the resulting network will always be on the real poles, and because the network is stable, the poles must be in the left half S plane, so the poles must be on the negative real axis. And if you have poles only on the negative real axis, it turns out that when you want to make frequency selective networks, you will be able to make only selective networks whose selectivity is very gentle. The frequency response cannot rapidly fall off with frequency, and in many applications it is necessary to have frequency response which dramatically changes with frequency. These kinds of frequency selective networks are called filters. They are able to filter one signal with respect, if you put in a bunch of sinusoids, they are able to selectively pick out only the sinusoid that you want and reject everything else. thing that we need to see is the frequency response of the common gate amplifier. The small signal equivalent of the common gate amplifier, the gate is incrementally grounded. The output quantity of interest is basically the small signal drain current, and the input is some kind of current source. The current source has got finite output admittance, right, RS. And as usual, we replace the transistor with its incrementally equivalent circuit. I call this Vx. So what should be the strength of the current source? It's minus GmVx, okay. And let's now add in the parasitic capacitance of the MOSFET. This is CGD, this is CGS, and this is CSB. CDB is anyway connected between ground and ground, so it doesn't matter. So the question is, what is I out versus I in as a function of frequency now. So I will change the direction of the current source and the sign. So can you simplify this? CGD can also be removed. I can replace this by one single capacitor of value CGS plus CSB. Is that clear? Now the next thing to do is to figure out, write Kirchhoff's current law and do the maths. What is Kirchhoff's current law telling you? At Vx In, which is the input current, must be Vx times Gs plus Gm plus S times CGS plus CSB, which means that Vx is nothing but In by Gs plus Gm plus S times CGS plus CSB, and I out is nothing but GmVx, which is Gm by Gm plus Gs plus S times CGS plus CSB. You understand? Into I, sorry. Which simplifies to I out by I in is Gm by Gm plus Gs divided by 1 plus S CGS plus CSB divided by Gm plus Gs. We saw earlier that if the Gm of the transistor is infinite, this behaves like an ideal current controlled current source with a gain of 1, and that's definitely true. As Gm tends to infinity, we see that at DC the gain becomes 1. Alright, in practice we know that the Gm is not really infinite, and then we said we have to use a large Gm. And what does large Gm mean? GMRS is much larger than 1, which is equivalent to saying Gm is much larger than Gs. And can you comment on the bandwidth? It is nothing but Gm plus Gs by CGS plus CSB, And we know that if you want to make this really work like a current controlled current source, in practice, GS will be much smaller than GM. And from the details of the device construction, it turns out, as I have mentioned to you before, that CSB is smaller than CGS, which means that the bandwidth is of approximately GM by CGS, transition frequency of the device. And please note again that you are getting a large bandwidth because the gain is very modest. You are only shooting for a current gain of unity. So if the input signal is small, the drain current also has to change by a small amount, which basically means that the MOSFET takes very little time to get there. Yet another instance where the gain and the bandwidth are fundamentally quantities which will trade off in an electronic circuit. We have seen amplifiers where we have resistors in the drain. Nothing really changes. You just replace the transistor, do with the incremental equivalent circuit. Now with all these incremental capacitances, do Kirchhoff's law, write Kirchhoff's law at every node, blah blah blah, do the maths. You will end up with pole zero locations and all this stuff. After looking at the common source, the common drain and the common gate amplifiers, what is the summary of the entire discussion? Every node is associated with parasitic capacitance, and it takes time to charge and discharge capacitances. Which means in the frequency domain, this basically corresponds to poles associated with the network. There is basically a gain, bandwidth, trade-off. There are many nodes in the network. What can you expect? Based on these 3 points that have come out as a summary of our discussions, what do you expect? There are a large number of poles. You understand? Why would we be interested in having a large number of nodes in the network? If you want to build an amplifier, why would we fundamentally be interested in a large gain? We know that if you have a forward amplifier in a negative feedback loop, you want to make the forward amplifier's gain as large as possible, so that the input-output properties of the closed loop system become independent of the forward amplifier itself. So that's our main motivation to try and go on increasing gain. And we've already seen that with a single stage, the gains you can get are modest. Typical examples we took are maybe with an active load you can get maybe 100 or maybe 200, that kind of thing. But in reality, we'd like very, very large gains, say maybe 10 power 5, 10 power 6. If you only have a building block which gives you a gain of 100 and you want a gain of 10 power 4 or 10 power 6, what do? We have to cascade amplifiers. Looking at the discussion so far, we have seen that every amplifier is at least associated with one pole. At least one pole. You could have more depending on the kind of amplifier. Alright. So if you cascade amplifiers, you certainly end up with a large DC gain, because the DC gain will be simply the product of the DC gains of the individual stages. However, the forward amplifier now, if you look at it as a function of frequency, you will find if you have more than one pole, if you have one pole per stage and if you have a 3-stage amplifier, where the motivation for the 3 stages comes about because the DC gain is not, of one amplifier stage is not enough, then you have a forward amplifier which is not just A cube, but A cube divided by 1 plus S by omega 1 times 1 plus S by omega 2 times 1 plus S by omega 3 in a very simplistic case. So far we have always seen the following, which is our feedback systems used to have a forward amplifier without any memory at all. So this would be A and the feedback block would be F, and we have said that assume the domain is all voltages, V out by V in, AF by 1 plus AF times 1 over F. But in reality now what happens? What do we have for A? In practice A is a function of frequency. To make A large, we need multiple stages. Okay. Each stage is associated with at least one pole, which means that the gain of each stage is dependent on frequency. If the open loop gain A is a function of frequency, then it follows that the closed loop gain is 1 over F times A of S times F by 1 plus A of S times F. So the closed loop gain is also a function of frequency. I mean, let's start from the simplest of amplifiers and see from a single stage amplifier. Let's see what let's add frequency dependence in the forward amplifier A. Let's see what happens to the closed loop performance. The first example, assume a single pole forward amplifier. So A of S is of the form some A naught divided by 1 plus S by omega P. So what is the closed loop gain? One over F times AF divided by 1 plus A of S times F, which is 1 over F times A naught by 1 plus S by omega P times F divided by 1 plus A naught divided by 1 plus S by omega P times F. Before I continue with the math, what do you expect will happen to the closed loop? What is the closed loop gain at DC? At DC, the closed loop gain will be 1 over F times A naught F divided by A naught F plus 1. Now as frequency goes on increasing, what is happening to the gain of the forward amplifier? Look at this expression. As the frequency of the sinusoid put into the forward amplifier is increasing, what happens to the gain of the forward amplifier? It is decreasing. So if the gain of the forward amplifier is decreasing, what do you think happens to the closed loop gain The closed loop gain is of the form 1 over f times AF by 1 plus AF. So as A starts to decrease, this quantity AF also starts to decrease. Thereby, this quantity AF by 1 plus AF, which was close to 1 at DC, will no longer remain close to 1. The closed loop gain, which was almost 1 over f at DC, will no longer remain close to being 1 over f, which basically means that the closed loop gain will also change with frequency. And as frequency becomes extremely large, the gain of the forward amplifier tends to 0. Eventually, at omega tends to infinity, the gain of the forward amplifier tends to 0, which means that the closed loop gain will eventually tend to 0. The output voltage here is nothing but an amplified version of whatever is coming in at the input of the forward amplifier. As the frequency becomes larger and larger and larger, the gain of the forward amplifier tends to 0, which basically means that whatever you feed in at the input of the amplifier, there is no use because the amplifier is completely dead. So, as frequency tends to infinity, the forward amplifier gain goes to 0, which means that the closed loop gain will also go to 0. So, you should expect that as frequency increases, the closed loop gain will also fall with frequency. Does it make sense? Okay, now let's do the maths and see if all this is confirmed. This is 1 over f. So I will multiply the numerator and denominator by 1 plus s by omega p. So what do I get? 1 plus s by omega p plus a naught f, which can be written as 1 over f times a naught f by 1 plus a naught f divided by 1 plus s by omega p times 1 plus a naught f. So the closed loop gain is 1 over f times, I am just rewriting the expression here, sure enough the DC gain of the closed loop system is what we expected, is 1 over f times a naught f by 1 plus a naught f, and as we expect, as the frequency increases, the closed loop gain is also falling off. So what is the bandwidth of the closed loop system? Omega p times 1 plus a naught f. What was the bandwidth of the forward amplifier? Omega p. Is this intriguing? The forward amplifier is still the same amplifier, but the moment you put it in a feedback loop, it seems as if the closed loop system has got a much wider bandwidth than the forward amplifier. Some magic going on here, or is it, there's nothing to be too surprised about? So how is it that the forward amplifier has got only a bandwidth of omega p, whereas the closed loop bandwidth is much larger than omega p? The closed loop bandwidth is going to be approximately how much? Can you look at that expression and make a quick approximation? We will always choose a naught to be so large that a naught f will be much larger than 1. So the closed loop bandwidth is approximately equal to omega p times a naught f. Let me explain this. Please note that the closed loop bandwidth is of the form 1 over f times A of s times f by 1 plus A of s times f. As omega goes on increasing, this term is reducing, so is this. And initially at DC, these two are very large numbers, and as frequency goes on increasing, these numbers start to reduce. So, originally, for example, let's say at DC, A of s times f was say 10,000, and maybe at omega p, A of s times f is how much? Omega p is the bandwidth of A of s, correct? So it must be about 7,000. But let's see what happens to A of s times f by 1 plus A of s times f at DC. Is how much? 10,000 by 10,001. In reality, please note this has to be a complex number. I'm just to get orders of magnitude, I just assume I'll take the magnitude and go with it. It's not correct. Okay, but to give you an idea, at omega p, what is As of f by 1 plus As of f? It is about 7,000 by 7,001. Alright? So, both these numbers are almost the same. Certainly at omega p, the closed loop response will be what was 0.9999 times 1 over f will become some 0.999, maybe 7 times 1 over f. You understand? If the closed loop response has to come down to 1 over root 2 times its value at DC, what must happen? So as long as As times f is a sufficiently large number, as long as it's much larger than 1, this As by 1 plus As of f will remain close to 1. If this number, if the closed loop response has to become smaller than 1 over f by a substantial amount, that can only happen when As of f becomes comparable to 1. And when does As of f become comparable to 1? If I plot the magnitude of As of f, A of j omega times f, at DC it is A naught times f, and at omega p it is A naught f by root 2. We all agree that it falls off. At what frequency will it fall to unity? Clearly this omega must be much larger than omega p. If omega is much larger than omega p, how can you approximate the denominator? The magnitude of the denominator is virtually omega by omega p. So what is the omega at which this becomes unity? It simply is A naught f times omega. It is around this frequency, the magnitude of AF becomes close to unity. It is at this frequency where the closed loop gain, this factor here, will deviate significantly from 1. As long as A times F is much larger than 1, whether it is 10 or whether it is 100 or whether it is 1000, the closed loop system gain will still remain close to being 1 over F. The only time during which it will deviate significantly from 1 over F is when this AF becomes comparable to unity, and that happens at around A naught F times omega. Okay? So you can expect that the closed loop bandwidth will be of the order of A naught F times omega p, which also comes out to the max.